Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, or welcome if you are new to my channel. Glad to have you here. So this is going to be my spoiler-free review for the new movie Terrifier 3, which is obviously at theaters. Just came out a couple days ago. I saw it last night with a group of people. Um, and so this is just my thoughts, like I said, spoiler-free on Terrifier 3. Before we get started, though, I picked up this shirt at a Spirit Halloween before. Um, Going to the movie. I wore this to the movie. Obviously, it's a terrifying. Excuse me. It's a shirt from the first movie, basically. I don't know how well you guys can see all of that, but yeah, it's based on the first movie, but it is a Terrifier shirt for Terrifier 3. So anyway, with that being said, I wrote down a few notes here that I'm going to go over. It's not a full blown review, obviously, again, so you don't need to worry about clicking off or mute or plugging your ears or anything. Um, so, just to give you a little background, obviously, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest Terrifier fan, but I do enjoy the movies, and I've enjoyed them more as they've gone on. Like the first Terrifier is very much a straight up slasher movie with very low, I don't want to say low quality because it's still effective, but it's low budget is a better way to say it, with that grindhouse feel and aesthetic to it. It's definitely probably my least favorite so far, but still, it's a good movie. Terrifier 2 really surprised me. I really enjoyed it despite the excessive runtime of it, which is really my only problem with that movie. So how do I feel about Terrifier 3? Well, overall, I had a really good time with it. I think if you're a fan of the first two Terrifier movies, you definitely want to see and are going to enjoy this movie to a certain extent. Um, it's a lot more of the same with some differences, both mostly positive, I would say, differences. But let's just go ahead and get into it. So, starting with the cold open. And the movie opens with, and this is teased in the trailer, the early trailer teaser. So, I'm not really giving away any spoilers, but, um, Art is dressed as Santa Claus and he goes to a certain house with a certain family. And does art kind of things there. And one of the big concerns that a lot of people had seeing the trailer in this movie kind of plays out in the first cold open and the first part of this movie in the cold open, which is art goes after children in this movie. Nobody's safe in this movie. Like in the first two movies, it was teenagers, it was adults in their 20s at least or older that art really went after. And in this movie, yeah, children aren't safe. Let's just leave it at that. And in this opening scene, they kind of let you know that. So there are a lot of concerns about, oh God, are they going to have like children being beheaded or killed right on screen? And yes, there are children that are killed in this movie. However, it's done in a way that isn't. They don't cross the line with it. To where it's going to turn off the majority of people. I think the director Damien Leone um, has a good pulse. He has a good sense of the pulse of his audience, and so he really knew how to like get right up to the line without crossing the line when it came to that. So yes, there are children killed in this movie, but it's not viscerally on screen necessarily. Although you do see some aftermaths. There's a lot of suggestion of it. Um, so I just kind of want to put that out there to put people's minds at ease. Now that's not to say that it's the easiest thing to get through because you still got children being killed. But it's not. It's done in a way that's, I don't want to say tastefully because anytime children are killed by a murderous maniac, it's not tasteful. But it's they did it the right way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And this all plays out in this opening scene where you have a family of four: the mom, the dad, a son, and a daughter. Um, and the sound design having to do with the son being killed in his bedroom is that's the suggestion that I was talking about, but it's very well done. And then we do see some of the aftermath of that. Obviously, the parents, they don't cut away anything there really. That's very effective. And then there's a before it gets to the opening title, um, there's a scene where Art runs upon the last character of the family and then it cuts to the opening title. So just wanted to talk about that cold open. It really, I don't want to say it doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the movie. The director Damien Leone even said that one of his favorite Tales from the Crypt episodes is the murder of Santa Claus. If you know, you know. If you're familiar with that series, and I think that's kind of an homage to that when he went Christmas on on this Terrifier movie as far as an atmosphere and an aesthetic goes. He wanted to do something like that. So it kind of shows off the best of Art the Clown, if you will, in a way. So that's the cold open. Very effective way to open the movie, even though it's not necessarily connected to the nuts and bolts of these movies at this point. So, moving on to the next point is the Christmas atmosphere, which is really good. Really enjoyed that, changing it up from the Halloween aesthetic that we got in the first two Terrifier movies to this one taking place at Christmas. And it's just got a lot of atmosphere. You have obviously Art's dressed up as Santa Claus. Again, it's not a spoiler because it's in the trailer. But you have a lot of Christmas decor, a lot of atmosphere having to do with Christmas. So this, I dare to say, in a couple of years, this is going to be talked about as one of the the best Christmas horror movies, frankly, or one of the go-to Christmas horror movies. I think it's already that just from watching it one time, just because of all the everything that's going on in the movie is all related to Christmas. So, yeah, great Christmas atmosphere. Really enjoyed that the director and they changed it up in that regard. Not to say it would have been a terrible movie had it been a Halloween night 5 years later. Which I should mention that they kind of flash back to the end of part two, and then they kind of continue with that and what we didn't see the end of part two where it got cut off. Um, and then it jumps to 5 years later, and that's when all the Christmas stuff takes place, basically. So they go back and kind of let you know how we got here again after the end of part two by flashing back, but then they go forward 5 years. I don't know what year it's supposed to take place in, but just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, the Christmas atmosphere is definitely one of my favorite parts of the movie. And of course, you can't talk about a terrifying movie without talking about the kills and the gore. This movie's got a lot of it in spades. I would say it's probably got the most kills of any of the Terrifier movies. Actually, it does. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't necessarily know that any of the kills are quite. They don't stand out as much as the kill from the first movie, hanging upside down. If you know, you know, or the second movie having to do with a bedroom. If you know, you know. So I don't think any one kill necessarily is on that level, especially the second movie, the bedroom kill. That's still, when I think about it, that's still just so visceral. But there's more of it. Like you don't go 10 minutes in this movie without getting a kill and some art carnage, as we'll call it here. The gore is definitely, they didn't hold anything back there. It's very gory, very realistic gore. And one of my favorite things about Damien Leone is he does the practical gore effects. There's no CGI involved here because he's a guy that grew up on those 80s horror movies. And so I really appreciate I would say that's my biggest appreciation of the whole Terrifier series. And you really get it here. I mean, some of the kills are they're very grotesque. They're also very real looking. So yeah, if you're coming to these movies for the kills and the gore, you're definitely not going to be disappointed in this movie. Going into it, I wondered because I heard some things, and I think some of it was marketing about if it's too much, if it's too gory, and I didn't get that sense at all. I think it's just more of a continuation of the first two Terrifier movies without taking a step back and maybe half a step forward at most, but it's not like way out there where I had to close my eyes or look away or anything. Now everybody's different. Obviously, these Terrifier movies aren't for everybody. If you're somebody that's not comfortable with gore and violent on-screen kills, then you probably shouldn't be watching a Terrifier movie, frankly. But yeah, it's here, and of course the shower scene again, not a spoiler because it's given away in the trailer, at least the idea of it, not the full scene, obviously. That's probably the one scene that people will be talking about in terms of a kill and gore scene. Um, from this movie. Um, it is a very effective scene, very gory. In fact, after the aftermath of the initial shower break-in with Art is actually, I would say, more gory than what you actually see in the shower, if that makes sense. If you've seen the movie, you know. There's one particular part where let's just say a chainsaw opens somebody up and that starts in an opening that's already there, and I'll leave it at that. But that was very effective, very gory. But again, I don't quite think it's to the level of the one from the first Terrifier or the second, at least not for me. Now, again, I only saw this movie about 12, 15 hours ago for the first time. Um, So upon rewatches, maybe that'll change. But for this movie, that's the kill that stands out. But there's lots of other kills, lots of gore. So you're not going to be disappointed there. I have to talk about art in this movie. I actually think this is the funniest Terrifier movie. I was literally laughing out loud in the theater. Art's always had sort of that funny clown expression, where one minute he's laughing while he's disemboweling somebody. Um, but just his expressions in this movie, David Howard Thornton just gets better and better with each Terrifier movie, and he's at the top of his game in this movie. Without saying anything, he says a whole lot. But he's just so effective with those expressions. And there's one scene having to do with a Santa Claus in a bar and a couple of other people, a bartender and another gentleman. That when Art sees him through the window, I'm not going to give too much away, but it's like a 5 to 7 minute scene, and it's absolutely hilarious. There's another scene where he overhears a couple of characters talking about him as a killer, um, and he's got great expressions and great reactions to that, which I was laughing out loud. I don't know. It's weird to say because Art the Clown is a sadistic killer, but he's just it's hard to explain because on the one hand he's so funny and so memorable, so unique, while being just unrelenting and just brutal at the same time. And I think that's what makes him so compelling as a killer, as a slasher killer, as a killer in general in horror movies, serial killer, whatever you want to say. But the humor in this movie, I thought was the best of the three movies so far, and I really liked it in two. And the first one doesn't have a lot of humor, but he's still got the Art the Clown moments in it. But this one, I thought they struck the perfect balance between the the visceral kills and violence and gore, while still but having a lot of humor in it as well. So yeah, Art's humor and just how funny the movie is overall, I thought was something that really stood out to me, as well as the Christmas atmosphere and the amount of kills. And then, of course, children not being safe in this movie as well. You got to talk about the acting as well. I already mentioned David Howard Thornton is great. Obviously, Lauren Lavera, who I basically have a big crush on at this point, having met her in real life and having seen her in two movies now. She's at the top of her game in this movie. I really loved her in the second movie. In this movie, her character's at a different point, obviously, PTSD, trying to deal with what happened in the second movie, which totally makes sense. And um, she's just great in this movie. And she has to go to some pretty dark and messed up places in this movie. Um, yeah, she's great. Um, Vicki is a big part. The character of Vicki is a big part in this movie, a lot more than she was in the second movie, and even more than the first movie in some ways. What's her name? Amanda Scarfetti, I think is. I can't pronounce that last name, but she's really good in the movie. The little girl, the character of Gabby, I thought she was good in this movie. Well, not asked to do a whole lot, but what she does have to do, particularly in the third act, was very effective. The aunt and uncle are very good. Yeah, the acting I think is the best. Just like the humor, I think it's the best in Terrifier 3. It's gotten better in each movie as the budget's gotten bigger in each movie. The acting has gotten better in each movie. And I think the acting's the best in this movie, with one exception, which we'll talk about when I get into the things that I didn't like as much in this movie. But very good acting in this movie. And on that point, let's talk about Vicky a little bit. The character of Victoria Vicky from the first movie. Obviously, if you've seen the first original Terrifier movie, you know that she's sort of the final girl, if you want to say. Although I don't know that there is a final girl in that movie, but she has her moments of kind of being deranged and snapping at the beginning slash end of the first movie. If you know, you know, because they flash back after the initial first scene in the first movie. Um, and then we don't really hear much from her throughout the whole second movie until the last 5 minutes of that movie, where she's usually basically used as a conduit to give a rebirth to a certain character. And in this movie, she's as involved as Art the Clown is, frankly, in this movie, especially in the third act. She actually scared me more than Art the Clown in the third act, because I've never really been scared of Art the Clown. Granted, he's very creepy. He's got a very creepy look and is very sadistic and disturbing. But I mean, in terms of just like flat out scares, um, he's never really scared me in that regard. But she kind of does. I mean, she's as lunatic, as deranged, and just fucked up basically, as he is, if not more so. And of course, she can talk. Um, so it's interesting what they do with her character in this movie, and it kind of fits into part two. And I kind of like the fact that they use that character from the first movie with the connective tissue throughout this franchise so far. So yeah, she's definitely somebody, especially in the third act, that you're really going to. She really has a screen presence in that third act. So speaking of the third act, that takes me into my last positive, I guess, if you want to say. The third act of this movie goes really dark. I would say the first two acts, 2.5 acts of this movie. Um, I don't want to say they're light because you still got people, even children, being killed, but um, it's done in a way where you still got Art the Clown and his sort of slasher, having fun with it, over the top kills and gore aspect. But then when that third act hits, in her aunt and uncle's house, man, it goes dark. I mean, there's some twists involved there where you're not really sure um, what some of the carnage is that Art and Victoria show in that third act. They kind of do a couple of twists, and I'm not even sure if the person that we're meant to think at the end of the day is the carnage that we see is the carnage we see. I kind of hope they're not, but I think that they are. If you know, you know. I don't want to give too much away, but it goes dark, and Vicky has a lot to do with that. Uh, Sienna really has to go into a pretty dark place and really has to fight back, both emotionally and mentally, as well as physically. Ultimately, um, it goes dark. I'm just going to leave it at that. Having to do with the character of Gabby, her brother Jonathan, the aunt and uncle, basically the parents of Gabby. Also, a certain kill that takes place for one of those parents that is shown on screen. I'm not going to say too much about it. I have to believe that's the kill that David Howard Thornton talked about in the interviews that almost got him to throw up while he was making it. I have to believe that's the kill, but I don't know for sure. It has to do with a certain. No, I'm not going to give it away. It has to do with a tube, but let's just say that, and one of the parent characters, the aunt or uncle. I'm not going to give any more away than that. But yeah, the third act, it also kind of goes more into the supernatural fantasy part of the what this franchise has become, which, well, let's just get into my cons with it. I still don't know how I feel about the supernatural aspect of it. I kind of feel like Art the Clown is a slasher, and then the supernatural aspect that they brought into the end of the first, beginning of the second movie. Um, it's almost a little too fantasy given some of the other things that are happening in the movie. I'm not sure I've completely reconciled that yet. Again, rewatching this movie, maybe I will. I will have to see. But the fantasy elements kind of come into the third act specifically, and I don't want to say it takes away from any of the kills or the gore or the art fun, the art humor, but it is a tonal shift that I'm not entirely sure works. Again, maybe I'm the only one, but I'm not sure that I've completely rationalized the fantasy versus the slasher and humorous aspects of the movie. It's just kind of a weird blend for me that I'm not exactly sure that it's a straight line for me, a straight through line there, as far as the supernatural fantasy elements to it. And talking a bit about that through line, well, I really enjoyed this movie and it's very entertaining, very Terrifier good. I still think I prefer the second movie, only having seen this after a one-time watch, of course. Um, and part of that's because I feel like there's a better build-up in the second movie to a final climax that's very effective and very satisfying. This one is satisfying and it's effective, but it's also sort of the Empire Strikes Back of the Star Wars trilogy, if you want to say. It leaves our hero character in a very dark place, a very desperate place, let's say. Kind of like in Empire Strikes Back at the end, where the good guys lose. This movie has very much that feel to it. If you want to say Terrifier 2, because Terrifier, the first movie, is kind of like the pre Terrifier trilogy. It's kind of its own movie in some ways, even though it is connected. But the second and the third movie, it's kind of like A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. And I'm assuming the fourth movie is going to be the Return of the Jedi, but we'll see. But um, I just don't think the through line is quite as good in this movie. I mean, Damien Leone even admitted he cut about 6 scenes out of this movie because there was a lot of pushback about the length of the second movie, which was about 2 hours and 25 minutes, which even was a little long for me. And other people obviously had the same feeling. Um, this movie's about 2 hours and 5 minutes, and it just kind of makes me wonder if there's some scenes missing where if you watched all of it, like a director's cut or whatever you want to call it, if that's released on Blu-ray at some point down the road, if it would make more sense. And so I want to hold back judgment a little bit regarding that. But watching this theatrical movie at 2 hours and 5 minutes, it doesn't. It feels like there's some things missing. Let's just say that it doesn't. It doesn't have a great through line all the way through the movie like the second one did, in my opinion. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And then my other final comment is kind of a nitpick is the podcast character. There's a certain character that's a big like crime podcaster character who comes off as really annoying. I don't think her acting's all that good. That's what I meant when I said the acting, like 98% of it was great in this movie, the best of the franchise. There's just one character that I really didn't. I thought she went a little too, like, her character turned it up to a 12 when it needed to be about an 8, if that makes sense to you. Now, it's rectified because let's just say this character doesn't have a great end of the day to this movie, having to do with one of the kill scenes. But yeah, that was a character that and I don't think you're supposed to get behind her. She's supposed to be more fodder. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That character just I wasn't. I don't know if it was the writing or the acting. It just didn't work for me. But that's a pretty small nitpick. So overall, guys, that's my review, my spoiler-free review for Terrifier 3. Obviously, if you're a Terrifier fan, if you like the first Terrifier, if you like the second movie, I will say this movie does blend those first two movies pretty well. So for the people that were disappointed in part two, which I was not one of them, that wanted more of the first movie, you get a little bit more of that in here. For those like me that really liked the second movie and didn't want to go away from it, you still get that in this movie. So it's kind of like the perfect balance. As I said, I just don't think maybe because of that, as a result, the through line isn't quite as through as I'd like it to be at the end of the day. But you're not going to be disappointed if you're a Terrifier fan. If you like the kills and the violence and the gore and don't care about the supernatural stuff, you're going to like this movie. If you like the supernatural stuff and more of the lore and the character development, and you're a big fan of Sienna as a final girl like I am, you're going to like this movie. So, definitely see this movie if you're a fan of Terrifier. If you're not a fan of the first two Terrifiers because you don't either it's too gory for you or you don't like any kind of supernatural element, then you're probably not going to like this movie. But I think most people will. So I'd recommend seeing it. It's fun to see it in the theater with a crowd. My theater was full. People were laughing. People were kind of grossed out, those expressions of "Ooh," kind of thing. So with that being said, though, I'm going to give this movie, and this again is just on an initial spoiler free review, I'm going to give it an 8.5 rating. And I feel like it might even be better than that, but I need to see it again. So 8.5 out of 10 for Terrifier 3. I hope you enjoyed this non spoiler review for Terrifier 3. It's only been out a couple days. Go see it at the theater. Definitely see it if you're a fan of Terrifier and you enjoy all the aesthetics that go along with that. Um, and all the Christmas atmosphere, which really stood out to me in a very positive way in this movie. So it's fun, it's entertaining, it's gory, but it's done well for the most part. So yeah, with that being said, please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming horror content on my channel, my existing 31 Days of Halloween horror series, or what I have coming out the rest of the year. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you're having a good spooktacular October. And with that being said, stay scared. Bye.